Today's episode will discuss violence against women as well as eating disorders, so please listen consciously. And if you or anyone you know needs help, the National Alliance for Eating Disorders has a hotline that is available Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. You can reach them at 1-866-662-1235. 1235. It's almost 4. They're close.
I'm glad you're here on this Sunday. I'm going to get right into the message. I'm going to tell it like it is, as they say. Oh, I heard a hallelujah. Did you think I don't know what the hell is going on? And a lot of strange places. Where in the hell have you been? Hell fire! Hell fire! Hell fire! All right. Okay, there's something else, too.
Hello, and welcome to the Satire Fire, week 2 of us being kind of depressing from the jump. I'm Sydney.
And I am Samuel, and in an effort to avoid silencing women, I am not going to cut out a single word Sydney says during this episode, so Sydney, you've really got to cut back on the racial slurs.
Oh my gosh, this is a callback to, if you listen to our Lula Dean's little library of banned book series, Samuel was having me read the most insane quotes from racists. Things. Vicky Baggett, yeah. If you know who Vicky Baggett is, you're a real one. But Vicky Baggett, you're not a real one. I still think about her. But today we are going to be diving into 2 more short stories from Carmen Maria Machado's collection of stories called Her Body and Other Parties. Last week we discussed the very first story in this collection, which is titled The Husband Stitch. So if you've read that, or if you're interested in learning about it, or you just like to hear us talk, head back to part 1. And then today we're going to be talking about Real Women Have Bodies, as well as 8 Bites. As I mentioned at the beginning, we're going to be talking about violence against women. Specifically, I'm going to be giving you some statistics. Not to tease this. That's actually that was crazy for what I'm about to say.
Stay tuned. Sneak peek sex violence.
Sex violence and murder. Wow, murder.
Hello, my little murder cupcakes.
And I'm also going to be talking about eating disorders. And so if those are topics that you don't know if you can listen to stats about them, or there's something that you just are personally struggling with and you don't think that this would be a safe or smart thing for you to do, please be conscious of yourself and your mental health, and don't listen if you don't want to. And if you need help, I shared one resource at the beginning of this episode for the National Alliance for Eating Disorders hotline, but there's all kinds of resources you can find online. And also, like we mentioned at the end of last week, lean on each other, lean on your community, lean on your friends, talk to each other about what's going on. But Samuel, I think you had a note as well before we get into the episode.
I did. I had a note, an official apology, and an official correction. I was put on the spot last week and asked what the definition of an illusion is, and then proceeded to provide a very thorough definition of what an allegory is. Mm-hmm. And while I do think that The Husband Stitch could be viewed from the lens of being allegorical, it was not what was asked of me, and so I would like to apologize for showing my lack of English expertise and getting those two mixed up in my head. I'm sorry, it's been a while since high school English, so...
In the spirit of supporting women, I was trying to make Samuel look like a dumbass on the internet.
I really thought I popped off too. Like, no preparation, no nothing. Just like, oh, do you know what this literary device is? And I was like, of course I do, Queen. Here's what you need to know. And don't listen to men is the moral of this story.
Besides being wrong, what else have you been doing recently? Anything you've been reading or watching?
Yeah, I've been reading quite a lot, as is usual for me. A book that I wanted to talk about that I read recently is one that I am going to make the argument that we should potentially add to our list of books to cover. I don't think that it is directly been marketed as satirical, at least not what I saw when I first picked it up, but I believe that it is meant to be interpreted as satire. And that's the book No One Is Talking About This from 2021 by Patricia Lockwood. This is a book that is following a person who is chronically online and has kind of like made a career out of being a sort of like meme influencer and like posting funny little snippets, like very like drill-esque, if you're familiar with drill on various social media platforms. But like it says that her tweet that made her popular was tweeting, "Can dog be twins?" or something like that. Just like stupid things to post, and she's made a career out of it. And the book is broken up into two parts, where the first part is following her life as it currently is and like a stream of consciousness for her. And then in the second part, her sister has a baby who, due to a genetic condition, is projected to potentially not even be born alive, and if the baby is born alive, is likely going to die within a matter of days. And so the second half is about that experience reshaping her perspective of the world and of life and of like what is and is not significant. And I think that it can be interpreted as a satire on the current landscape of social media and the internet and being online and stuff like that. I did not resonate with it very much because I think that it was setting up a weird false dichotomy of either you're incredibly online or you have experienced trauma in your life that has shown you that life has meaning. Which kind of means like, oh, if you're online too much, you haven't actually had anything bad happen to you in your life, which feels like a fucked up take to have. And it also just kind of like came across as very like, it's that damn phone, you're on your damn phone too much, which I don't think that there's necessarily enough definitive evidence out there currently to say that as like a broad sweeping claim. So it was interesting. It was an interesting writing style. It was interesting to follow this main character. And I liked the story. The story was like emotionally charged. Kind of. It very heavily relies on the fact that it's always going to be sad to read about a baby dying. And so I don't think that it's necessarily as effective as it could have been if it was written a little bit differently. But like, you know, it's not going to be a fun and uplifting thing to read the back half of this book necessarily. But yeah, it was fine. I did not like it, and I don't think that I agreed with the author very much. But potentially it's something that we can talk about on the show, and maybe it will, on a second read, do more for me.
You're chronically online. We'll just wait till you experience trauma.
Exactly.
Interesting.
But have you been reading or watching or doing anything lately that you wanted to inform the public about?
Yeah. So I was peer pressured after 3 seasons finally into watching The Summer I Turned Pretty.
Oh, damn. I don't know if that's peer pressure so much as propaganda.
Well, I've never watched it, not season 1 or 2, and now season 3 is being released week by week. And I just honestly, I know it's a book trilogy. I've never read the books. It's not really, it's like a YA romance type story. And I just, that's not something I'm typically very interested in. So I've never read them, and I've never attempted to watch it. I don't know, I just found out like so many people in my life were watching it and they were asking me their opinions, and I was seeing all these, I didn't even ask for this, but my TikTok For You page, propaganda, was all these like edits of The Summer I Turned Pretty. Everyone's talking about it, and I was like, fine, I'll watch it and see what I think. And I finished season 1. I haven't watched season 2 or season 3 yet.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I would say it's a good show. But I will say that the last episode of season 1 made me cry. It was really well done.
Okay.
And spoilers, because I know you're not going to watch this. So anyone listening who hasn't watched this and thinks they might skip forward a bit, in season 1, basically you find out that the mom of of some of the main characters, it centers around these two moms who are best friends from college, and they kind of have like a bit of a homoerotic friendship, which love that. I mean, maybe it's just me thinking that, but I think that. And there is a line later where the ex-husband of one of the moms is talking to her and being like, I think the only person you ever truly loved was Susanna, like your best friend. I'm like, okay, well. But anyways, so Laurel and Susanna are the moms, and then they each have children. They each have 2 kids. And every summer, these families spend time together on Cousins Beach. And one of the characters, Isabella, who goes by Belly, it's her first summer after kind of hitting puberty. She says she's turning 16, and they're going to Cousins Beach like they do every summer, but she's pretty now. She's the summer I turned pretty. So that's kind of the concept. Yeah. And so her life is changing, it's coming of age, whatever. None of that's important. But we find out in season 1 that Susanna, the mom of 2 of the kids, it has cancer, and basically terminal cancer. And there's this really dramatic scene at the end of season 1 where everyone finds out. And it was really well done. And I think, honestly, the thing I'm rooting for the most, but I know that Susanna dies, so it's not, there's no point in rooting for this, is Laurel and Susanna's friendship. Like, I think that's been my favorite part of the show, is these 2, like, middle-aged moms. One of them is divorced, and the other one is, like, separated from her husband. I'm like, okay, girls. So they have a really cute friendship. I don't know. I'm gonna keep watching it because it's interesting, but not in like a wow, I'm just so impressed by the writing type way. It's just kind of like, you know.
I think so. I mean, it's not a great sign when your favorite plot line within a show is not the titular eye of the summer I turned pretty.
Yeah, I will say, if anyone is wondering if I'm Team Jeremiah or Team Conrad at this point, I'm Team Conrad. But
is that more of the Edward or the Jacob? Which one is which?
So I've actually never seen all of the Twilight movies, but I feel that maybe it's more of the Edward, but I don't know.
Okay, that's fair. I think that it was fucked up that Jacob soul bonded to an unborn child, and I'll come out and say it. I think that's weird.
That is weird. I don't really... Yeah, that's another fact about me, is I think I've seen... I've never read the Twilight books, and I think I've seen 4 of the 5 movies. I haven't seen one of the first 3, and I don't know which one it is, but I was never that into that, so...
It's crazy to me that you don't know for sure that it is the 3rd one, that you could have potentially seen the 1st and 3rd, but not seen the 2nd, or you've seen the 2nd and 3rd, but didn't see the 1st.
I think I saw the first one, for sure.
Okay.
But I don't know. I think I didn't see the one where, like, Edward's gone or something. Isn't that a plot line?
I've never read it or watched it. I'm just dating an emo bitch.
I was like, how do you know this information? Yeah, we need, wait, can I name drop him?
I just need to I'll ask my boyfriend to come on and he'll explain it. We just have to figure out a way to identify Twilight as a series as being satirical.
Guys, let us know if you want us to do a whole series on Twilight. I'll watch it. I'll watch them all for the first time for sure. The first one I ever saw was Breaking Dawn Part 2 in theaters, and I was so confused. My friend was like asking me to go with her, and I was like, I've never seen the others, and she's like, it's fine, and it wasn't fine.
That feels not fine.
And I kept asking her questions, and she was like, shh. And I'm like, I don't know what's happening. I've never seen any of these. Anyways, so with that, let's move in to her body and other parties, and specifically, real women have bodies. So I kind of wanted to, so for this episode and the next episode, I chose 2 stories rather than just one, and I chose them based on themes that were not similar, but matched in a way. And so both of these stories deal kind of with the issue of women disappearing in a sense, in some way. And there's this quote from Carmen Maria Machado that I wanted to start before we get into quick summaries of these 2 stories. She did an interview with the New Limestone Review, which if you listened last week, I also read a few quotes from that interview. And she was asked about these 2 stories specifically, and she said, "I wanted to explore the ways in which women are disappeared from this world. Murder, being ignored and devalued and tucked away, and the ways in women," I think it says in women, maybe it meant in which women, but she meant in, but the ways in women are trained to disappear themselves, weight loss taking up less space. So women being disappeared and women disappearing themselves. And so that's why I chose these 2 stories, basically because that was Machado's response. And so I thought that would be nice to pair them together. And so Real Women Have Bodies opens up in a prom dress shop in a mall. And I really like the description of this dress shop. It says that, very first line, "I used to think my place of employment, glam, looked like the view from inside a casket. When you walk through the mall's east wing, the entrance recedes like a black hole between a children's photography studio and a white-walled boutique. The lack of colors to show off the dresses, it terrifies our patrons into an existential crisis and then a purchase." And so we're starting from the jump, like we've talked about already, with this kind of eeriness, this like horror-esque type writing. Like, it's not just happy prom dress shop. You're already like, whoa, what's going on? Why are we talking about caskets? And then the narrator, who is just an unnamed young woman, we can guess she's probably in her 20s because we know she's graduated from college, kind of is introducing us to what she does for work, which is just sell prom dresses, and a cast of characters. And so we meet the store owner. Her name is Gizzy, or Gizzy, that's probably how we pronounce
I said
that.
Gizzy in my mind because it made me think of hot dogs with glizzy, and so that's why I said it that way. But I've never heard anybody called Gizzy, or I guess you could pronounce it with a soft G, but then it'd be Jizzy, and I don't think that's right.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. So we have the store owner, Gizzy, who is very tall and kind of foreboding in a way, but also is described to have a very youthful, unlined face, even though she is described to be about the same age as the narrator's mother. And then we also meet Natalie, who is a co-worker of the narrator's at the dress shop. And Natalie is kind of just an angry young woman. She's also recently graduated from college and is really frustrated to be in debt and to be working at a dress shop rather than pursuing like what she got her degree for. And then we also meet 2 of the men who work at the photography studio next door, named Chris and Casey. And really all you need to know about them is they're just dumb. Like, they're just dumb men. They're just like think of like frat bro type men. Like, that's who they are. And then lastly, we meet a woman, Petra, who is queer. We don't know if she's a lesbian, and we don't actually know her like sexual identification, but she's queer. She dresses very, masculine, and she delivers dresses to the store, and Petra's mother is someone who makes dresses for the store. So Petra comes in and delivers them. And so we meet these people in different interactions. Natalie, we meet her because she's like angry and she's really rough with the dresses, and she's just kind of throwing them around and is not careful with the merchandise at all. We meet Petra when she's delivering dresses, and we learn that the narrator has a crush on Petra. And then we meet Chris and Casey right after we find out that there's also something going on in the world. There's this kind of like epidemic ravaging the world in which women are disappearing. But by disappearing, it's not like they're going missing. They're literally becoming invisible. And so they just kind of, their physical bodies start to fade away until they are invisible. But they're not dead. They're just...
Well, it is a little bit unclear as to whether or not they're dead, because they kind of like start fading, they start becoming invisible, they stop being able to like communicate, like they lose their personality. And so it's kind of like hypothesized of what is actually happening to these girls. Like, are they becoming ghosts in real time, or are they still alive? Can they come back from this position? Like, it's very unclear as to what is happening to them and whether or not they are still people as a result of it.
Yeah. So we find out that these women are becoming invisible, and we, as Samuel just said, we don't really know exactly what's happening to them. And right after we find this out, the narrator's outside on a lunch break with Chris and Casey. They're smoking, they're sharing a cigarette, and they're talking about how they want solid women. You know, it just really sucks that women are becoming invisible and they're becoming like less than solid, because you can't have sex with a woman who's not solid. And that's really all they're talking about. They're not talking about concern for these women or this epidemic. It's just that if they keep disappearing, we can't have sex with them. That sucks. And so we know something's not right in the world, but then we also start developing this sense that something's not right in this store, the dress shop. And the narrator kind of senses something off about the dresses, and she feels like kind of a sense of care and protection of them. And so when Natalie, her coworker, ruffles them or throws them down, she goes and straightens them, and she puts them up and, you know, unruffles them and is very gentle with them. And we also know that Gizzy, the store owner, is very gentle with them as well. And we find out that women have actually been, some of these women who have disappeared have been kind of weaved into the dresses. And so basically Petra takes the narrator to the motel where her mom works, and the mom is sewing and making these dresses, and then later Petra takes the narrator into a room where all the dresses are hanging, and she realizes the room is just surrounded with invisible women, and it's because these women have been like sewn into the dresses. And it's very strange, but it's also, I don't know, it's like very powerful at the same time, the way it describes it.
Yeah,
I would say. And then the only other thing that I feel like is really important to note is that Petra and the narrator develop this relationship. And, you know, the narrator quits her job at the dress shop because she's simultaneously like feeling protective over these invisible women, but also horrified by the fact that they're trapped in these dresses. And so she quits and kind of just throws herself into this relationship with Petra, but then Petra begins to disappear. And the story ends with Petra fully disappearing and the narrator having the realization that they'll all disappear. Like, none of the women are safe, including herself. And she goes back and breaks into the dress shop and starts like ripping the dresses up and is trying to free these women, but they don't leave, even though she's in a sense freeing them. And that's how the story ends. Is there anything I missed that you feel is important?
No, I think that covers it as far as the plot goes. It's relatively straightforward.
Yeah.
I don't know if you specifically mentioned it, but it is worth noting that when Petra's mom is sewing these dresses, the invisible or mostly invisible girls are willingly being sewn into it. Like, it started out with the mom not sewing these girls into dresses, and then they started showing up and like slipping into the seams as it was being sewn, and she wasn't comfortable at first, but then she just kind of stopped fighting them and let them become part of the dress.
Yeah, so it is willingly. I guess that is important to know. And then before we go into like more kind of context of these stories and analysis, I want to also do a quick summary of 8 Bites. This one is incredibly straightforward. So this story is about a woman who is trying to live her life based on this 8 bites rule that she learned from her mother. And so basically her mother taught her and her sisters that all you need is 8 bites to make yourself full and to satisfy yourself. So, you know, whatever meal you're having, all you have to do is eat 8 bites, and that's enough food, and you'll stay skinny. But this woman has been unable to abide by this rule, and she was unsuccessful. And there's this really kind of triggering story that's told where basically she tries to eat 8 bites of her plate, and she's still hungry, and it's a plate of just pasta and greens, and then so she eats 8 more bites, and there's barely a dent in the plate, but she's still hungry, and so then she has 8 more, and then she finished the entire pot, and she finished all the food that she had prepared that wasn't supposed to be for one meal, and she starts crying. And we also kind of learned that after she gave birth, her body was changed forever, and it's described as suddenly everything was wrecked by carrying a child and giving birth. And so basically this woman's really unhappy with her body, and she is unable to live by this 8 bite rule. But her 3 sisters have also all struggled with this rule that her mother set, and they got bariatric surgery, which basically cuts their stomach down to the capacity of only 8 bites, like makes it possible for them to only eat 8 bites of their food.
Yeah, it reduces the capacity of your stomach so that you feel full after having eaten less food.
Mm-hmm. And so it says, I could not make 8 bites work for my body, so I would make my body work for 8 bites. And so her sisters have gotten the surgery and say they're much happier, and so they support her, and this woman goes through with the surgery. It goes really well, but her daughter is very angry with her. Her daughter doesn't understand why her mom can't just be happy with her body, and why have you taught me these ideals, and why didn't you teach me about feminism and all these things that like are supposed to make me successful as a young woman. Instead, this is like the example you're setting for me. But the woman's still like, you know, she goes through with it, and she gets the surgery, and she's very quickly transformed. She can live by the 8 bite rule now. People are telling her she looks better. But at the same time, there's been like this eerie presence moving through her house after the surgery. It's making noise. It's leaving things in different places. She doesn't know what it is. Is it a ghost? Is it a person? And one night she goes down to the basement, and she discovers this like featureless body that's very like lumpy and kind of adolescent looking. And it's seemingly, I think, and we can talk about this more, meant to represent, I had 2 theories. One, it could be like her like adolescent body, like as a child, and kind of like, or it could be just all the fat she's gotten rid of. I don't know. I feel like or it could be, but it's just something representative of what she got rid of. And she tells us it's unwanted. She kicks it. She hits it. And then the story just goes on, and she's living a life where she is smaller, but she's detached from like her daughter. They only have visits once a year. It's kind of hollow. And then at age 79, she dies, and that body, that featureless body, carries her to her death, and she apologizes to it and says, I'm sorry, I didn't know. And that's the plot of 8 bites.
So this is going to come up for me later. You did get one pretty critical thing wrong. which is, I think that the visiting with her daughter once a year was something that was happening before she got the surgery. Because then at the end, after she's confronted the old self, it says, "I am a new woman. A new woman becomes best friends with her daughter. A new woman laughs with all her teeth. A new woman does not just slough off her old self. She tosses it aside with force."
Oh, so I guess throughout her life, after her daughter left home, they've only...
Yeah, she has a tumultuous relationship with her daughter while she is still pre-surgery. But then after surgery, I think the implication is that she has gained the confidence necessary to be able to be in a more connected relationship with her daughter.
But then it says at the end that I will die the day I turn 79. I will wake up early because outside a neighbor is talking loudly to another neighbor about her roses and because Cal is coming today with her daughter for our annual visit. So I took that to mean that they still only did annual visits.
Oh, that's probably true, but I feel like I interpreted it as they have a better relationship. I mean, I have a good relationship with my mom, and I only visit her maybe once or twice a year.
Okay.
Because we live in different places is the main issue.
Yeah. Okay. So, those are the two short stories, but before we get into some analysis, I wanted to talk a little bit more about two of the things that are kind of themes of these stories and also that were mentioned by Machado in her interview that I quoted from at the beginning, which are violent crimes and murder, more specifically, as well as eating disorders. And so I'm kind of just going to trudge through some statistics and,
Sick.
Bear with me. They're not fun. So in 2023, 85,000 women and girls were killed internationally, according to a UN Women's Report. 60% of these murders were committed by a romantic partner or family member, and the data shows that 140 women and girls die every day at the hands of their partner or a close relative, which basically means that one woman or girl is killed every 10 minutes, at least in 2023. So these are intentional murders. There's also unintentional deaths, which...
Yeah, and I mean, I assume, that, you always, whenever you're reading these numbers, have to go off of numbers that are reported and numbers that are, investigated and stuff, because that seems low, which is a good thing for it to be seeming low, but if you had asked me to guess before this, I would have said it was much higher than that.
Well, these are intentional. This is just from the United Nations report. There's other reports. Mm-hmm. There's also, unintentional deaths that, vehicular manslaughter. I'm sure, I didn't dive into exactly how they collected this data, but yeah, one woman or girl every 10 minutes is pretty intense. So regardless, the World Health Organization estimates in 2018, so these are 2018 estimations, 1 in 3 or 30% of women worldwide have been subjected to either physical and/or sexual violence, and that can come from an intimate partner or it can be a non-partner, from anyone in their lifetime. So 1 in 3 women have been subjected to physical and/or sexual violence. Mm-hmm. Of all the homicides or the murders of women in 2018 in which the victim to offender relationship could be identified, 92% of the victims were killed by a man they knew, and 63% were killed by current husbands, boyfriends, or ex-husbands. Men are significantly more likely to be murdered by a stranger than women are. Women are more likely to be murdered by someone they know. And only 5% of male homicides are the result of intimate partner violence. And compare that to, think about that last statistic that we talked about, where 63% of murders of women were killed by current husbands, boyfriends, or ex-husbands.
Ladies, we gotta bump those numbers up. These are rookie numbers. 5%, you can do better.
And I read this New Yorker article that we'll have linked in the show notes. It's really, really good read. Well, not a good read. It is called "When Can a Woman Who Kills Her Abuser Claim Self-Defense?" and it outlines a murder case from New York State, but it also talks about some other cases, and a 2005 study from the Department of Corrections, and this is from the article where the article cites this study, says although there are no national statistics on how many women are jailed for killing their abusers, that 2005 study found that 67% of women imprisoned for killing someone close to them, excluding children, had been abused by their victim. And so basically, it was trying to make the connection that though 5% of male homicides are the result of intimate partner violence, we can probably claim that at least over half of those were people killing their abusers, women killing their abusers. Men are murdering black women and girls at a rate almost 3 times higher than white women. For indigenous women and girls, the homicide rate is 6 times higher than it is for their white counterparts. And 375, just for the year 2021, 375 transgender people were murdered, and 96% of those murders were trans women or trans feminine women. And I think those are important to note because these statistics are showing that like just women are murdered or face physical or sexual violence just so much more than men do. But then you take that for black women, for indigenous women, for transgender women, and it's even more significant. And 375 might sound low, but it's not.
Yeah, when you consider the percentage of the population that is transgender, that is a much higher percentage of the transgender population than the whatever it was, only couple of percentage of white women.
Mm-hmm. And these are all statistics about male violence against women. And obviously women kill women. And obviously men kill men. But I think that we can separate those facts from the alarming statistics that are available to us about the amount of men who are causing women to disappear from this earth.
Yeah.
And then, so now we're switching away from that into some statistics about eating disorders. So in the United States, 9% of the U.S. population, which also, that might sound low, but that's 28.8 million Americans, will have an eating disorder in their lifetime. And this is a report from the Academy for Eating Disorders and this like economics firm. Anyways, so they work together to create this report. And it's actually more so about the social and economic cost of eating disorders in the United States.
That's fucked up.
That's what the report is, but it's more so talking about like how much is it costing our healthcare system and how the prevalence of them and the mortality rates. So
that's how I like to look at all of my societal issues, is what's the economic side of this? Racism? Okay, sure, obviously we've got racism, but what does racism cost me every year? Because there is a number that's low enough that I don't care.
Yeah, it's an interesting report. I felt more confident in it because it was a partnership with the Academy for Eating Disorders, and so like it's data. Yeah,
I would imagine that the statistics are correct. It's just what they use the stats for I have a little bit of a distaste for. Yeah. 10,200 deaths per year are a direct result of an eating disorder, which equates to 1 death every 52 minutes of an eating disorder. Is that in the U.S. or worldwide?
In the U.S. Okay. These are all in the U.S. These right here. Eating disorders affect people as young as 5 years old to over 80 years old. They affect all races, clearly most things do, but people of color with eating disorders are half as likely to be diagnosed or to receive treatment. They also affect all genders, but females are 2 times more likely than men to have an eating disorder. And that is the primary data from that report that I wanted to share. And then also from the year 2000 to the year 2018, the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, there was this report about eating disorder prevalence worldwide. And so from 2000 to 2018, the prevalence increased from 3.4% to 7.8%, which is quite the significant jump.
Yeah.
And around, or maybe over, I couldn't get a clear number on this, but 70 million people internationally live with eating disorders. And let's keep in mind that that's like diagnosed, reported. And eating disorders are a condition that are like very underreported and very underdiagnosed. And also there's disordered eating, and you can experience disordered eating without being diagnosed with an eating disorder.
Yeah.
So that was not a fun section of this podcast, but there is a lot of data around what's going on in terms of the ways in which women are both disappeared and disappearing themselves from the world, as Machado mentioned. So let's talk about these stories and how they relate to that context. What did you think about these stories? What stood out to you?
So not to get too much into like review portion, just talking like yet at least, I think that Real Women Have Bodies is probably the strongest story in the book, at least as far as my preference goes. I do think that 8 Bites is one of the weaker stories, in my opinion. With Real Women Have Bodies, I would be interested to hear your thoughts on it. Clearly, because of the way that she talked about it, Machado sees it as being a satire, or at the very least making commentary on both eating disorders as well as murdered and kidnapped and missing women. But I think that it is way, way, way more indicating eating disorders than it is talking about the murder of women, because you have the whole element of like literally women are becoming less substantial in order to be fit into a dress. And like if you're looking at that from a satirical lens, it's very clear what we're talking about here, which is the unhealthy societal beauty standards that are asking women to make their body shape or look or fit a certain way in order for them to be able to live inside specific types of clothing.
Yeah.
And I think that comparison is very obvious. And so I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are on why it's also talking about murdered women, because that comparison is kind of lost on me.
I don't think it explicitly talks about murdered women. I definitely think this book as a whole talks about violence against women.
Yeah.
So like I see that connection just like from the stories. But I do think it talks about women being like devalued and tucked away, which is another thing she mentioned. And I think she was hoping that could be symbolic from women disappearing from the world and no one cares.
Yeah.
And so I think that like if you wanted to make that connection of like the amount of women who are, especially when you're reading it with the whole context of the other stories, and you think about how, I think something that like strongly stood out to me about Real Women Have Bodies is how these women are only valued when they're attached to beauty, which often is attached to youth.
Yeah.
And as they get older, they start to lose like agency and self-esteem, and they are being devalued, and then they just disappear altogether. And the only thing of value that they can attach themselves to is like something attached to beauty and like, which the dress is. And so I don't know that I made the connection of murder either, but I thought that like thinking about the way that these women were just disappearing and no one really seemed to care. And in the story, Casey and what's his name? Other frat boy. Chris. All they cared about is that they couldn't have sex with these women who were disappearing. And people in the news were kind of like, at first it was shocking, but more so it was just made into a joke. Like, these women are disappearing, and it talked about how they thought that it made them feel uneasy that the women couldn't be seen but might still be there, and they might be plotting against men and the human race, but more so men. And so I thought that could be really symbolic for, especially when you attach it to, like, the only thing the men in these stories cared about was, like, having sex with them.
Yeah.
To these ideas of, like, women, especially, like, intimate partners killing women when they're no longer of use to them, or when they won't have sex with them, or they won't give them what they want. Like, when they'll use you up, and when you're not useful anymore, you can disappear. And I think that could be kind of symbolic for the murder of women, especially, like, motivated murder, having to do with women not being what a man wants.
Yeah. I think that for me, the, like, most direct comparison comes just from the fact that the women are disappearing, which specifically to me really calls to mind Indigenous women, who, it's not just that Indigenous women, like you mentioned, are murdered at a significantly higher rate than white women, or basically any other group of women. They also just disappear at an alarming rate, and it's something that is being talked about more often now than it was even a couple of years ago, but it's still just like a thing that no one really, on a wide scale, as far as, like, specifically white people, are conscious of or addressing. And so I feel like I see that comparison, but it also, a lot of it just still boils down, like, the conversation between the two guys gives the same energy of the conversations that are seemingly angled towards providing an alternative to the issue of women's body images, while just reinforcing a different set of standards, where it's the conversations of, like, oh, a man likes something that he can hold on to at night, and stuff like that, where the concept behind it assumedly is, oh, you shouldn't have an eating disorder that makes you super duper thin because, and then instead of filling the blank in of, it's not healthy, you don't have to value your body and your looks based off of other people's opinions and stuff like that, it's instead, oh, you shouldn't have an eating disorder because turns out men like women who don't have eating disorders, and that should serve as example enough to not have one, because clearly you have an eating disorder because you're trying to get men's attention. So just stop having an eating disorder and you'll get even more men's attention.
Yeah. I think the strongest theme in this story, especially Real Women Have Bodies, is, like, the sexualization of womanhood or even girlhood. And, you know, actually I wrote, when I was in high school, I did speech and drama club. Everyone let me know if you did speech and drama in high school. Comment. Send me a DM. And I did this category called oratory one season. And basically it's just giving a speech, like a 10-minute speech. And mine was, I think, called The Sexualization of Girlhood or something. But it was about that very topic. And something I talked about in the beginning of the speech was how just from a young age, girls are inundated with images in the media of what they should be, and everyone is, men too, but those images that girls are given are often rooted in men. And so, like, the examples I gave in the speech were Disney princesses, and they're really, Disney is trying to do something about this in present day, I would say, more so than they used to. But when I was a kid, they didn't have these woke princesses. But like, you know, Belle, she enjoys reading and she's smart, but she's mocked for that, and she's called strange for her love of reading. But it never really comes full circle where it's like it's okay to be smart. Like, it kind of does, but also then she develops this really like weird relationship with an animal who is like abusive to her and likes her because she's pretty, and like he lets her read, but he's not really like valuing her for her knowledge. And then like Ariel, she's like has this beautiful voice, but she gives up this most meaningful part of herself just to win over a man with her looks, you know, things like that. And that defines, without maybe it being like girls aren't realizing this, but they're internalizing that, and it's showing them like what makes them worthy. And then when you get older, you're exposed to even more blatant examples. And so I think that maybe like part of this story is like a critique of like the way the fashion industry and just capitalist markets in general are preying on these stereotypes as well, and preying on sexualizing womanhood.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And so I think that's like a really strong aspect of this story. And because of those things, when you can't be valued because of your beauty or your youthfulness, you want, that can kind of lead us into 8 Bites and like what might you do in response to that pressure.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. I also 8 Bites isn't one of my favorite stories, but I think it's important to talk about.
I think that particularly if we're talking about this theme, it's very obviously part of the theme that's running through the book about eating and women's bodies and the perception of women's bodies. And I think that it is also very clearly one of the more satirical elements of the book. Like, I think that Real Women Have Bodies is probably the most satirical, and this one is kind of below it a little bit.
Yeah.
So, do you want to talk about the stuff that you liked about it first before I talk about the stuff that I didn't like about it?
I only had one thing otherwise that I wanted to mention, and I think, and this is also about Real Women Have Bodies, but something I like about this story is that sex in this story, specifically, you know, the narrator she develops this relationship with Petra and they are having sex. And for me, sex felt kind of like a contradiction to fading away. Like the sex was real and it was physical, and it felt like they were like reclaiming their power through this sex. Like when the world is falling apart around us, you can feel me and I can feel you, and we're here. And it's like an intimate sex. It's not just like a physical sex. And I don't know, I liked the way it was used in the story. And I also, and I don't know if this was intentional, but thought it was interesting that it was like a queer relationship. And 2 women, you know, they're finding intimacy with each other without men. They're not meeting the standards that the men are expecting. And exploring this intimacy, and that was something I liked. Like, I just liked the way sex was used in that story specifically. I don't know if you felt that way about it, or if you thought that it seemed like, and I think we talked about in our 1984 episodes how sex can be kind of a form of resistance, or sex as power.
Yeah.
And this was another example of that, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that it was an interesting element, if only because it proved or pointed to the fact that beauty standards for women are not limited to the expectations of men, because one of the 2 women who are in a queer relationship does become invisible and starts to fade away and succumbs to what you can kind of interpret as being a societal pressure to look a certain way, which, because this is happening to a queer woman in a queer relationship, discounts the idea that this is specifically limited to straight women who are doing this for pressures that are put on them by man. Like that this is something that's reaching broader than that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if you want to talk about what you didn't like, I will say, like, before you do that, I like both of these stories. Neither of them is my favorite. We actually haven't gotten to my favorite story yet, so. But I do think Real Women Have Bodies is a very strong story, and I think, like, the symbolism is really interesting and creative. I've never read something like this to represent the way women are portrayed and the expectations and the disappearance of women. And
it's definitely, I think, one of the stories that leans the least heavily on some sort of a narrative crutch. Like, it feels very much like Machado writing for herself instead of taking another idea and then adapting it into her style. And so because of that, I enjoyed it from that perspective. Whereas, like, I think a lot of the other stories are taking a known folk story or something along those lines and then doing some sort of reconfiguring in order to modernize it. I think that this one is doing that to a much lesser degree.
Yeah.
But as far as 8 Bites go, my main criticism is I think it fails at the end because the surgery works. Like, the intention for her to get this surgery, to lose this weight, is because she sees herself looking a certain way, resulting in her feeling a certain way, and that making her have a better life. And I think that by having all of those things come true, it undermines itself. Where it's saying, yes, she reconnects with her daughter in a way that's meaningful. Yes, she starts to feel more confident and smile with her whole mouth. She is getting complimented by strangers. And really the, like, negative side effect of it is that she ends up dying at 79 years old. Which is young for a woman and is young for, like, most people. But it's not like she died at, like, 56 from complications of the surgery or anything. And so it just felt a little bit too forgiving of the character for it to be saying what it was trying to say, where it's like seemingly wanting to make a critique about the fact that you have to give up an essential part of who you are in order to attain a specific aesthetic appearance. But then it is kind of saying, but it's worth it. And I didn't love that. That just doesn't feel like a message that really resonates or is, like, valuable.
I think I disagree with, like, what you're supposed to get from it, because I don't think you're supposed to take it to mean that she just, like, everything was okay and everything was better. I took it to mean that, like, her life, like, her physically, she looked better, and, like, for a while her life was improved in the way she thought, but then as, like, she reflected back on her life, she realized how hollow and, like, shallow, like, she might have her relationship with her daughter might have changed and improved, but her daughter spent her whole life knowing that her mother didn't love her body the way it was. Like, there was that scene where the daughter, Cal, goes, "Do you hate my body, Mom?" And the mom's like, "I love you." And then the daughter's like, "Do you love every part of me?" And the mother never answers. And so I think that, like, Cal spent her life, like, knowing, like, my mom didn't love herself and her body, and that also meant she didn't love every part of me. And I also think that, like, at the end, it's like, here's where I learn if it has all been worth it. And then she's being held by, like, that the old her that was cut away. And she realizes that, like, it loved her, the old her loved her, but she didn't love it, and she apologizes, and she's like, wait, I was wrong. I don't know. I interpret it as she realized, like, I was too shallow. This wasn't, I maybe things got better in some ways, but I lived, like, a hollow life where I wasn't fully myself, and maybe that's what my daughter was trying to say the whole time. I don't know. And I kind of interpreted that their relationship might have been forced in a way because of some of these things they could never agree on. But I don't know. Maybe. I
feel like I could have maybe seen that interpretation if her daughter was not such an unlikable character. And it felt so unbelievably selfish for her character when her mother is saying, I'm doing this thing, I'm finally doing something for me. Her daughter then says, well, that sounds like you're making a comment on me as a person, because of the thing that you're doing for you. Like, if you are interpreting it from a sympathetic lens for the daughter, and you see the daughter is being correct, then the takeaway is that you should, in fact, gain your value from the way that another woman looks. Because if the daughter was confident within herself and satisfied with herself, then while she may morally object to the fact that her mother would make this change to her body, she would recognize that that change doesn't actually impact her or reflect in a negative light on her. And then I also feel like there should have been, if it was going to be interpreted in the way that you're interpreting it, there needed to be another paragraph. Because it just goes straight from, I am a new woman, I am beautiful, everything is going well for me, into, I still sometimes think about my old self, but I'm never going to see my old self again. And then I died at 79, and I recognize that the part of myself that I lost was an innate feminine entity that is going to outlive all of the women that are on the planet. And I just don't know if that last minute moment of self-reflection makes up for all the time that she spent with no reflection whatsoever. Like, if she goes her whole life, like the rest of her life, presumably multiple decades, being this new person who does feel positively about the changes that have happened, does it work as a valuable critique for her to reconsider on her deathbed? Like, in the last second of her life, she has a reconsideration. Does that reconsideration balance in the scales of, but she had no second thoughts for like 20 decades, and also she looked super hot the whole time?
I don't know. I do think it's my second least favorite story in the book.
I think it's mine too.
But that being said, I just don't know if we're supposed to like either character. I think we're supposed to see them as products of the world they live in, and we're supposed to hate the world more than we're supposed to. I don't know. I thought that they both were a reflection of the faulty world that they're living in.
I definitely can see that and can agree with it. I think that then my next step is, but she found a way to exist in a flawed world where she was happy. And at the end of the day,
I don't know if we're supposed to think she was happy.
I just don't know if there's evidence to say that she wasn't, though. Like, that's why I'm saying if there was another paragraph where it was like, damn, things are kind of getting rocky again. Like, I think that she should have, at some point, while in her new body, experienced a moment of saying, wait, this didn't fix everything. But there's just not a moment of her saying, wait a second, my life is still kind of shit. I just feel like it completely skipped that section that should have been at the end of saying, no, bariatric surgery won't fix everything.
But you can live in delusion in a flawed world, even if that delusion is shallow. Like, in like a sense of, like, realization or an understanding of the world could never come, or it could come last minute. Like, I don't know. I just feel like it doesn't have to be like she's reflecting. She's not, all she cares about is looking better and feeling better. She doesn't care about reflecting. She hates her old self. She's like, get out of my sight. And then she doesn't have to see it again. And it's not until she's confronted with it one last time on her deathbed that she's like, oh. And is that strong? Is that a strong metaphor? I don't know. But I feel like I understand what she was trying to do, I guess, is what I'm saying. But,
yeah, I think that I also understand. I think that the difference is that you are willing to be more sympathetic than I am. I think we're both looking at the story and seeing the same potential within it, but I think that you are using some of the evidence within the story to help push it towards the realized potential, whereas I'm taking some of the evidence in the story and pulling it away from the realized potential, where I think that it's just a matter of how sympathetic you're willing to be to it, and I think that you're more sympathetic than I am, which is not a bad thing or an incorrect thing. It's just, like, I think that if we were reading a Kurt Vonnegut book that misses the mark a little bit, I'm probably going to end up arguing, no, I think that here's what he was really trying to say if you look at the big picture of it, because I'm sympathetic to him as a person and as a writer. Yeah. And so, I think that we're both saying a very similar thing. It's just a matter of personal interpretation, which is what it all comes down to.
And I also think, I guess last thing is that she didn't ever heal from her eating disorder. And so she's not gonna, her eating disorder in a way I think took her life is what you're supposed to think. And so if you're in the midst of an eating disorder, you're not like having deep realizations about, wait, but I should just love my body. Yeah. Because you have a disorder. But anyways, this was fun. Listeners, let us know what you think about 8 Bites, and if you think it misses the mark or if it doesn't, or what your thoughts are, and also on any of these stories, because I feel like this is the first book where Samuel and I have like differing opinions of it, and that's kind of fun because so far we've like mostly agreed on.
This is definitely the least we have agreed. I think that we're both in a similar kind of ballpark with this one, but it's very, normally I think that there's maybe a 1 or a half star swing between us, and this one feels a lot more like a 2-star swing.
And so, I think like to end, let's just go through the 5 bookmarks of satire quickly for each story. So starting with Real Women Have Bodies. This is something we do just to kind of gauge how satirical is this book, or in this case are these stories. So we have 5 bookmarks. This is what satire is. And so for Real Women Have Bodies, the first one would be humor, and not really, no.
I think that that's going to be the case for all of the stories that we talk about, where there's like maybe 1 or 2 humorous adjacent lines, but I don't think that any of them particularly, like, neither of them are supposed to be a funny story.
Yeah. Exaggeration.
Yeah, I mean, while women are I think that 8 Bites has less of an exaggeration than Real Women Have Bodies. Real Women Have Bodies is obviously exaggerating the situation, whereas 8 Bites, I think that you could say that some of the characters are a bit grandiose, but it's a little bit less exaggeration, but still there.
And we have irony. I think 8 bites has irony.
I was about to say, I feel like in your interpretation, 8 Bites is an ironic story, and I think that I'm a little bit more literal on it, but I'm willing to give it that point.
But not real women have bodies?
I don't think so. I mean, unless
Yeah,
you disagree,
alright.
it didn't feel very ironic to me.
No, I don't think so. Ridicule, I would say yes for both personally, but less so for real women have bodies, but there's a little bit of it, especially with the 2 male characters.
Definitely, it's ridiculing the men and the news media and like politicians and stuff.
And then the last one is critique, and I think all of these stories are
Yeah,
critiquing.
definitely.
So I guess for real women have bodies, that gives us a 3 out of 5. And then for 8 bites, also a 3 out of 5, but a little
Yeah, a different
looser.
3.
Yeah. And I feel like we already kind of talked about like how we felt about these 2 stories. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think that covers it.
All right, well, thank you for listening. And I know that the past 2 episodes have been maybe difficult to listen to. And so if you're here and you're listening, thank you. And once again, take care of yourself, take care of your friends, take care of your family. Believe women. Don't kill women. Don't do that. Don't assault women. Don't victimize women. I leave you with that.
Don't say we didn't tell you.
If you want to, comment on our discussion, let us know your thoughts, let us know your favorite stories in this book. Whatever you want to do, you can find us on Instagram at the Satire Fire Pod. That's POD. And you can also find us on TikTok, Blue Sky, and YouTube at the Satire Fire.
As well as all of that, please be sure wherever you're listening, you like, comment, subscribe, tell your friends about it. I think that podcasts are really only spread by word of mouth, so if you enjoy it, let a friend know who might also enjoy it. Our intro and outro are remixes of the song 48 by Culla, and we are going to look forward to seeing you next week when we're talking about 2 more stories from this book. Sid, would you like to tell people what those are so they can prep ahead of time?
Yeah, we will be talking about mothers and difficult at parties. Once again, it'll be maybe a lot. So, but after that, I promise we'll get back to maybe some less depressing content. But it's important to talk about these things, and yeah. Why? Trying to be serious here and it's just not working. Thank you for listening. Looking forward to one last discussion on this really intense book that I love so much. We'll see you next week. This is the Satire Fire. I'm Sydney.
And I'm Samuel.
Bye.
Bye.
I just about come to the end of the road. Here, I've just about lost patience with you people. You get your ass out into the mountains or someplace or hide in there and watch that damn tube. But if not, fuck it. I'm done. In fact, my sermon